Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Newcastle upon Tyne Unitarians. Whether you're joining us here in chapel or online, you are very welcome. Whether you are new or a veteran here, welcome. My name is Diana. I'm a member of the congregation here, and I'm going to start us off with our value statement. As Unitarians, we don't have a creed or a set of beliefs that hold us together, but we do have values that we hold dear. We welcome all who seek the meaning of life and who believe that human spirituality is wider than any one tradition and deeper than any one set of opinions. With a respect for our Christian origins, we seek to explore all truths from all sources. Our fellowship gives us strength and encouragement in daily living. Our service today will be led by Amaradaya from the Newcastle Buddhist Centre. So this will be a slightly different session from what we normally have. There'll be no hymns. But yes, I'd like to hand over to you, Amaradaya, to lead us today. Thank you so much.
Hello. Good morning. Thanks for inviting me back. Very nice to be back and see you all. As I say, the positive counterpart to the precept on refraining from sexual misconduct is, I will practice simplicity, stillness, and contentment. It's not immediately apparent why that should be. It is possible that the only reason that sexual misconduct is mentioned at all is because it is an example of our most basic craving, our most basic drive. It is our most kind of crude, almost animalistic drive. And therefore, you could say that the third precept is, I will refrain from craving, and therefore, when it's put in the positive, I will practice simplicity and contentment and stillness. Anyway, that's all a little bit doctrinal and a bit boring, so I thought I would talk more about the actual experience of stillness and simplicity and contentment, rather than as a practice. So let's just kind of first contemplate that word, stillness. It's a very attractive word for most people, certainly for most Buddhists. You know, a mind that has come to a natural rest, equilibrium, that's also quite a nice associated word. And Buddhism teaches that there is an ever-present stillness, an all-pervading stillness at the very heart of existence that we can become aware of, or become aware that we are part of. That's probably a better way of putting it, and always have been. That I'm fairly sure about. I don't personally, I don't think I don't know what this stillness is at its depths. You know, I haven't plummeted its depths myself. Unstable sometimes. Buddhism also points out again and again, quite helpfully, all of the ways in which we add complexity to our experience and therefore miss this all-pervading, ever-present stillness. You know, we talk a lot, Buddhists talk a lot about the now, yeah, being in the present moment. It probably trips off our tongue, probably too readily, actually. But yeah, how that is in reality all there ever is, the now. We sometimes say, the past is gone, the future is not yet, and even the present does not stay. So that, where does that leave us? That leaves us in this kind of, it is eternally now, if you kind of catch my drift. We also sometimes say everything is present equally. Yeah, everything is equally present. If there is only this present moment, well, how can that be complex? Everything is just being exactly what it is right now. Everything is equally present. But what tends to happen, according to Buddhism, is that we insist that there's something rather special about us. We kind of place ourselves quite centrally and say that, I mean, this isn't a very conscious thing, maybe, but it's implicit in our current understanding of ourselves and the world that we are central. We are the center of our own universes in many ways. Everything else exists in relation to us. The world is something that is happening to me here. And that it's that centrality that seems to cause quite a lot of complexity, when perhaps actually maybe there isn't any. So yeah, as I said, a beautiful simplicity when everything, including ourselves, is allowed to be equally present right in this moment. But that is something that we can get a sense of in meditation very often. Meditation, by the way, is not always the formal sitting practice. You know, when you think of meditation, you might think of a kind of cross-legged formal sitting, which we might do a bit of today. But actually, walking meditation can be very absorbing for some people, especially people who maybe find it difficult to, sit still. You can kind of walk at any pace, really, but most people probably find a slightly slower pace than usual more helpful, because you're coalescing all of your attention, all of your awareness on the heel coming down when the heel is moving away from the ground, when the pad of the foot is coming down, and awareness of breath as well. So that the kind of, after a while, mind and body gets into this kind of synchronicity, and that we can enter into something quite still, quite contented, quite simple. And when I've had experiences of this, it's also accompanied very often by an awareness of this is a moment of my life right now. My life isn't actually taking place somewhere else or some other time. And very often I think when we think of my life, we can think solely in terms of the story arc of my life, where I've been, the experiences I've had, where I'm going, if we have a sense of that, which I think most people probably do. But of course, our lives are so much more immediate than that, aren't they? This step won't happen again. This breath won't happen again. In fact, it's already gone. It's already gone. You can't hold on to any of it. This is a constant practice in Buddhism, constantly letting go, letting go, letting go. And I think people who have really made doing nothing, consciously doing nothing, a practice in their lives, like my friend Ratnaguna, he kind of puts it in his diary. So Friday, doing nothing. Sometimes people say, what are you doing on Friday? And he kind of, I'm doing nothing that day. Oh, great, that's why you're free, you can come and he said, no, I'm doing nothing that day. It's a very conscious practice. Anyway, people who have made it a conscious practice say that you're allowed a cup of tea and you're allowed to sit and look out of the window, but that's about it if you're really doing the practice of doing nothing. So no objective, nothing to attain to, nothing to achieve in this moment, a mind that doesn't particularly want to move in any particular direction. That doesn't mean, of course, that thoughts and feelings and all the rest of it don't arise, but there is a kind of natural ebb and flow to those type of things that we can kind of just be quite simply with. And we're not kind of, as I say, not holding on to it. Nothing latches on for very long. And we just sit there observing, especially if your window overlooks nature, that's probably better, but the cityscape probably works just as well. Because really what you're wanting to observe is the transience of those things. And obviously that can be seen in all kinds of, but yeah, certainly the sky, the way that the sky is constantly changing. It's kind of, I suppose it's a practice of complete surrender. You know, you're becoming a bit of a receptive vessel, but a vessel with no bottom to it, because you as soon as it arises, you know, you don't want to obstruct this flow, this natural flow. It's, sometimes people actually give that physical expression, so it can be good to give physical expression to practices like this, just sometimes quite naturally or sometimes consciously, with palms facing upwards, this kind of gesture, when they're wanting to do a kind of letting go practice or a doing nothing practice. It's good to kind of give it physical expression. This is what's called mudra in Buddhism, the whole world of mudra. You might have seen the Buddha sitting with kind of different hand gestures before. These are particular qualities or particular practices that are expressed via different hand gestures. So this is fearlessness. Yeah, the spiritual life, I'm sure you agree, is not particularly easy life. There is a sense of, there's not much in our society out there that really encourages us to do what we're doing, you know, that really encourages us to develop spiritually. I don't know whether you think in terms of developing spiritually, but yeah, there can be an element of kind of going against the grain, in a way, if you're living a spiritual life, going against the current. So we sometimes talk about the spiritual life as being a heroic life in that sense. It needs a bit of courage. Anyway, this practice of not doing anything in particular is, at least in part, about not having to justify our existence by doing all of the time, and instead just experiencing being, which my teacher Sangharakshita calls the greater mandala of uselessness. I can't go into greater mandala, but a practice of uselessness, being willing to be completely useless and completely unproductive sometimes. And although it's a very simple practice by its very definition, but it can actually hit quite deep with a lot of people, because I think obviously we do get a lot of validation in life from doing. So it kind of touches that nerve. This is very closely related to a very similarly titled term of his, of Sangharakshita's, called the greater mandala of aesthetic appreciation. So this is a practice where we're learning how to relate to things and to people in a less utilitarian way. So I'll just kind of quote Sangharakshita himself for this point. Utilitarian knowledge is where one knows what the thing is good for, one knows what one can do with it or get from it. If all we see is the utilitarian value of something, then we're relating to it solely from a need, which then becomes a desire, which then becomes a craving for the object as the thing that will fulfill that desire. The tree, for example, is not seen as existing in its own right for its own sake, but as something to fulfill a need. If, however, there is no need to be fulfilled, then there is allowed to be no object and no subject. This is the state of Buddha, empty of any desire to use things for any particular purpose, and all that is left is aesthetic appreciation. So that kind of highlights a little bit what I was talking about before, about how difficult or how complex or how simple things appear to be is primarily a case of perception. So that there could be simply the form of what we call tree, or there could be me in the tree, there could be me and my need in the tree, me, my need, my desire in the tree, me, my need, my desire, and my actual grasping. So grasping is the acting upon the craving. Or to put that maybe a bit better, a bit more simply, there could be just simply experience, or there could be me and the experience, but already there's two. We've already kind of entered into a dualistic, well, a very dualistic framework. So already there's a bit more complexity. There could be me and the experience and what I want the experience to be, or what I don't want it to be, or what I fear that it might be, or what I fear that it might become in the future. So we can see how we kind of can create a lot of complexity out of stillness and simplicity. Of course, the main threat to deepening our awareness when we're sitting with a cup of tea doing nothing, or in meditation, or walking meditation, whatever, is the arising of boredom. So I just wanted to read a couple of paragraphs from Rigzen Shikpo. His book is called On Freeing the Heart. He says, it's important not to run away from feelings of boredom. If one could be aware at that moment of complete boredom, one might clearly see something of the nature of one's own mind. The ego attempts to remedy the boredom. It is a device to prevent boredom from ever happening, and so it constructs endless projects, occupations, and ambitions. In this way, it attempts to prevent true awareness from ever arising. It is as if it knows that if it ever stops doing these things, then the vague dawning of insight, which is boredom, will burst in and take over. Real meditation begins when the mind gives up and exhausts its ambitions and relaxes into its natural state without effort. Thankfully, he does go on to say how that is a lot easier said than done. But I did find it interesting that he kind of almost equates boredom with the vague beginnings of some kind of spiritual experience, insight. Which it could, I don't know if I want to say much more about that, but it certainly could change our relationship to our boredom if we were to approach it as possibly the vague beginnings of some sort of spiritual experience, like insight, which it could well be in the sense. I mean, who really allows boredom to persist for any real length of time and kind of push on through, if you know what I mean, and see what's on the other side of it. It is very understandable, very natural, that when there is some stillness of mind, that we would see things a bit more clearly. That when the mind is very kind of busy, well, we're not going to see clearly, and that when there is some stillness of mind, things do naturally come into a bit more focus. I think it's very easy to mistake stillness for referencing a kind of a mind-created stillness, kind of something that through effort and through striving and through some sort of mental control we can achieve a still mind, when actually that's a complete misnomer. Is that the word? It's the whole effort and striving and attempts at mental control actually only tend to further tensions, mental tensions and physical tensions. Yeah? We can never be closer to stillness, we can never be closer to truth, the reality that the Buddha realized, than we are when we're here, now, with things as they are. I'll give you a very short, probably my favorite quote from Dogen. Dogen Zenji, he was a 13th century Zen master. When you want things to be other than they are, reflect that they can only be as they are. When you want things to remain as they are, reflect that they have no unchanging nature. So both the pleasant and the unpleasant arise into our experience and pass, by the way. But we have to work on receiving both of them equally. not loving one and hating the other, because that is a complete merry-go-round. There's just no way off. We can't enter into stillness by that. So the ability to hold both the pleasant and the unpleasant equally, that is the key to going beyond them altogether, to a place where we actually don't even feel the need to label them as pleasant or unpleasant. We've kind of gone beyond the distinction of pleasant and unpleasant. Or if we continue to label them as such, they're certainly no longer the main kind of driving force in our life, you know, the acquisition of one and the successful avoidance of the other. The fundamental problem, according to Buddhism, that prevents stillness and simplicity and contentment from naturally being present is what you could call the good old-fashioned me illusion. So I try and include this in almost every talk I give, because it is the main message of the Buddha, that, you know, this very strong sense that we have of a kind of fixed, independent selfhood, which, according to Buddhism, amounts to nothing more than illusion. It's the root cause of all other assumptions, the root cause of all of our unrest, all of our suffering, all of our other mistakes in perception. It is the original pebble that caused the subsequent ripples. So with the separate, independent me as our understanding of ourselves and the world, it seems essential that I gratify myself and protect myself. And of course we do that in a variety of different ways, and cause a whole load of complexity, endless complexity, in fact. So the main task of the Buddhist, therefore, is to practice living our life absent of that self-construction. Can we really know what it is to be without being this little me that I think that I am? And that's essentially what we're doing in meditation. We're kind of noticing when that self-construction is present, when it isn't present, or when it's not so present. You know, just kind of staying aware of whenever we're building self and world again. And actually, even if we're absent of that construction for a flash, for a fleeting moment, when we're kind of sitting with a cup of tea doing nothing, or meditating, or walking, whatever, that's not insignificant. That's pretty significant, even if it's a flashing moment. But you know, we want to dwell there longer. We want to, next time, you know, we might be able to dwell there in that place that is absent of a separate, independent me a bit longer next time. Someone suggested, I was reading, that these qualities, stillness, simplicity, and contentment, are progressive or sequential, meaning that, well, he was saying, from the practice of stillness, we quite naturally simplify our lives, and from that simplicity arises contentment, which seems to kind of hold together. It makes a certain amount of sense, but I was thinking to myself, I don't know what a practice of stillness means. Stillness to me seems more like a fruit of simplicity. So it feels like to me simplicity is the practice. That is something I can do in my life. I can keep on simplifying, and we do that in lots of ways. You know, Buddhists try not to amass things around them. Celibacy also is a popular way of simplifying our life. So yeah, that feels like something I can actually apply to my life, and out of that arises stillness and contentment. I think maybe the main part of the meditation we'll try Zazen, which is translated as just sitting. There's not much that can be said about just sitting practice, because it is just sitting. But there is a traditional instruction which says, don't try to think, don't try not to think, just sit. So yeah, allowing things to come, allowing things to go, not being a kind of interventionalist in our experience, but kind of resting back and observing experience arising and passing, which it absolutely does, of its own nature, of its own accord. Not trying to hold on, not trying to push away either. But maybe we'll get there by some breath work. We'll kind of do some mindfulness of breathing to settle the mind and body first. So if I give instruction, I'll give verbal instruction a little bit, but I'll also use the bell because, well, obviously these singing bowls, they make a continuous note, and it can help, especially if the mind is off somewhere else. First of all, it acts as a bit of a mindfulness bell, kind of coming back. But because the note is continuous, it's something that we can kind of stay with for a bit of time. But in order to give, should I move this microphone a little bit to where I'm sitting? Okay. So something that's comfortable, but also something that kind of invites a bit of alertness as well. We don't want to be so comfortable that we're drifting a little bit. So comfort and alertness are the two words that we always kind of bring to mind. Yeah. I don't know if I'll say any more about posture. If you keep those two words in mind, you'll find something that kind of works for yourself. You can completely close your eyes, or you can just lower your lids and just kind of have a rather soft gaze in front of you, not too far in front of you. And I usually begin by bringing to mind that there's nothing to do, there's nothing particular to do, there's nothing expected of me, there's nowhere else I'm supposed to be, nothing else I'm supposed to be doing right now. That seems to have a very natural effect on the body. The body relaxes and maybe the mind follows a bit. So just a few minutes of coming into the body. Maybe you could do a bit of a body scan. You can start in the feet and work your way up to the crown of the head, relaxing as best you can as you go. There's parts of the body that feel quite neutral, you can't quite get a sense of them. And then there's parts of the body that feel very definite. There's a very definite sensation in the stomach. Just make sure that that's relaxed and you're not holding on in the stomach. Shoulders as well, just dropping away from the ears. Don't forget those subtle muscles, so relax your throat muscles and around the eyes and the jaw. Take some awareness to the sensation that's present in the sitting bones, where you're making contact with the chair. Of course, this sensation is present because gravity is pushing down on the solid mass that is the body. So just get a sense of the solidity of the body. Try and keep giving all of your weight down. Every time you breathe out, and see if you can kind of give all of your weight. Try and feel completely held and supported by the earth, I guess, ultimately. Just keeping that sensation in the sitting bones in your awareness. And then just see if you can broaden that awareness very slightly, so you become aware of the very slight sensations that are present in the pit of the stomach, the sensations of breathing. See if you can hold both of those in your awareness for a bit. It's almost like all of your awareness is balled up And resting very gently in the very core of your body. Something very still and stable and sturdy there. You keep on coming back to that place. Every time you feel distracted over the next 20 minutes or so. So let's have a little period of sitting with the out-breath. Every time you breathe out, know that you're breathing out. Where is the mind right now? Is it still with the out-breath? If not, that's just the nature of mind. Noticing that you've drifted and gently coming back to the out-breath again and again, however many times you need to do that, that's the practice. And if it helps you stay, you can place a count right at the end of the out-breath, just as it's leaving your body. You count 1. It's usually a short gap. The in-breath begins, turns into the out-breath, count 2. You go all the way to 10 and start again at 1. And then just shift your awareness very slightly to the in-breath. See if you can experience the difference. Every time you breathe in, know that you're breathing in. If you find counting helpful, then you can place a counter just as the in-breath is beginning. Then just drop any counting that you might be doing. And see if you can stay with the entirety of the breath from its beginning to its end, relaxing on the out-breath, rejuvenating on the in-breath. See if you can get absorbed a little bit in that natural cycle. Breathing. This breath won't happen again, and it's already gone. Just see if you can be present with this breath. Now this one. We can refine our awareness even more by honing in on very subtle sensations of breathing. So look around the tip of the nose, very slight narrowing that you can stay with, or a coolness at the back of the throat. Now we'll enter a short period of zazen, just sitting. Don't try to think, don't try not to think. Just sitting. Allowing things to come, allowing them to go. Not pushing or pulling against experience. Or if that's what's happening, just notice that that's what's going on. Just come back to the body, become aware of its solidity, aware of the shape of the body, the space that it's taking up in the room. Awareness of the space around the body. The only thing that I usually like to say about the end of the meditation is, especially if you are a morning sitter, if someone is a morning meditation person, it can be very tempting to, as soon as the meditation is over, you kind of, right, you're cracking on with your day, we've all got lots to do, but you do have to pay attention to that period, that transitional period between sitting and not sitting, and resist the temptation to immediately starting to move into activity. Anyway, all right, so we could have some questions and answers if everybody has any questions. It doesn't have to be related to what we were talking about, it could be anything at all. I'll do my best.
Would you be happy to talk a bit about your own experience of boredom? You talked about pushing through and what it's like on the other side. Have you got any experience of that?
Yeah, that can arise. So we go on retreat quite a lot. We try to. So there are retreats where we're together, where it might be quite structured, but there are also solitary retreats. So just by ourselves for, I don't know, week, 2 weeks, few months. Sometimes people go on solitary for a few months. The longest solitary I did, and I go back to the same place every year. It's a stone cottage in North Wales, and it's really is kind of in the middle of nowhere, quite literally. And yeah, but I suppose on date 1 and 2 and 3, I'm still busying myself and kind of, oh, I could read this, and I could do that, go for a walk, I could cook and do all of these things. By day 3, 4, I'm starting to slow down, and usually towards the end of when the solitary is coming to its end, I'm starting to get into something quite still and simple. But yeah, then comes the arising of boredom, and so yeah, you kind of experience the desire to want rid of it by distracting yourself. But you know, going on solitary retreat is quite a rare, well, it's a precious time. You don't want to squander it. So yeah, if you can muster up the discipline, sit down and experience the boredom, and it can be uncomfortable. But I think, I mean, don't take this too literally, but I did hear someone talk about, well, I mentioned about going to the other side of boredom and seeing what's on the other side of it. Apparently, if we really did allow boredom to persist for probably about 30 minutes, it kind of exhausts itself, and there's something that we enter into. And yeah, I don't know if I can say much about it, but it's there. Yeah, uncomfortable, giving way to something less comfortable, less uncomfortable, and something yeah, quite still, and yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just an observation. I was managing quite well to get my mind still, but every time I felt I was feeling relaxed, you started talking.
Yeah. Right, well, mental note, I'll take that. I mean, it's sometimes difficult with led meditations to get that balance right. You want to give instruction, but you also want to give time to people to actually implement that instruction. And yeah, it can sometimes be difficult to know how to get that balance right. But I'll remember for next time that actually you don't need as much instruction. You just need to get on and do it. Yeah. Yeah.
I did, yeah, I did.
Does music have any part in
Music, not strictly music, I wouldn't say. I mean, one of the what we call the distinct emphases of my particular order, which is the Triratna Buddhist order and community, we do make the arts one of our distinct emphases, and it is really quite distinct. There's some of these things, there's 5 of them, I'll not go through all 5, but there's some of these distinct, what we call distinct emphases of our order, that are not terribly distinct. You would find them, like spiritual friendship, for example. I'm sure you know that you need people around you who have similar aspirations, you know, similar support. So, but you would be able to find that in probably every Buddhist order. But yeah, the arts, the importance of the arts, and therefore music, I suppose, that is quite particular to us. And we talk about it in terms of really just being aware of, how do I not sound, I don't want this to kind of sound snobby, but there is, I'm sure we would all agree, there are forms of art that are more refined than others. So just be aware of what you're taking in, kind of, you could say, again, it sounds a bit snobby, watching EastEnders, for example, will have a certain effect on the mind in the same way that going to the opera will have a certain effect on the mind and a certain effect on consciousness. One is more refined than the other. I'll leave you to guess which one. But and similar with music. So really, we just if music is mentioned at all, it's about be aware of third-rate entertainment. It probably is better to put on some Bach than to put on some, I don't know. Yeah. It kind of refines consciousness a bit more.
I mean, the festivals, right?
Yeah.
What I'm listening to. So
Yeah.
the other thing about all is, I mean, so we get double the door, that's very meditative. You lose an hour.
Yeah.
When it comes to this,
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I probably agree with that. But I mean, there is, when we get together to do devotional worship, sometimes people are a bit surprised that there is such a thing as devotional worship in Buddhism, because they think, you know, we have people coming to the Buddhist center, in a way, some of them wanting to get away from that, from ritual and devotion. Especially if they've grown up with it and they think, oh, Buddhism is such a safe bet, it's so rational, and so kind of, which it is, we do value the rational, but there is this whole other side to it, this faith element, devotional practices. So, but yeah, when we get together to do devotional worship, there is chanting, there can be music, you know, it's kind of it's a part of what we call puja, which is really just means devotional worship. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, nice.
Very nice to spend some time with you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you.